When we look at the history of viticulture and also the wine trade, we have to be aware that viticulture and wine growing was spread first by the Greek. From Greece it came to Italy, and then it was the Romans and the Roman Empire who brought viticulture with them. Although first the Greek and then the Romans brought with them viticulture all over Europe, Asia and North Africa, the cradle of viticulture is thought to be in the Caucasian area. So the wine growing countries Georgia and Armenia are said to be the most ancient viticulture areas in the world. The Greek and the Roman troops and settlers then brought grapes and the knowledge of grape growing to all over Europe, Asia and the North African areas. Already in Roman times, the wine trade was very well developed. There were routes over which barrels were transported and traded throughout the entire Roman Empire. At some points in history, the viticulture in the Roman provinces, such as France and Spain, became so strong and important that the Roman Emperor forbid the import of grapes into Italy. For a certain period of time, there was even a law against planting new vineyards and growing wines in the Roman provinces. Only Marcus Aurelius, with the nickname later on Probus, then allowed again to grow grapes in Roman provinces, including France, Spain, and also Germany and Austria. Probus is still a very popular name for Austrian restaurants in wine-growing areas, and we still think of this Roman emperor who allowed again that grapes are planted in the provinces. On this map, we see some very important trade routes throughout the entire Roman Empire. We see that all the provinces were very well connected with Rome, and that the trade at that point in history was already of very big importance. In Greek and Roman times, wines were mostly kept and transported in amphoras. Barrels were not so much in use back then, although later on they proved to be much easier for transportation and to age wines. Amphoras had to be kept in an upright standing position when transported. On this picture we see a reconstruction of a wine shipping boat. From the reconstruction of historical sources, we know that already in Roman times wine trade had an enormous impact on local wealth and wine growing traditions. It is estimated that several million amphoras were transported in Gallia, the Roman province, nowadays France. The Romans had an own god for viticulture and the enjoyment of wine, and this wine god is Bacchus. Another important figure in terms of wine cult is Sucellus. We can say that basically all European wine-growing countries and all European wine-growing areas share more or less a similar history. So in most cases, the Roman Empire was a first step for a really organized viticulture in European countries. After the decline of the Roman Empire, we have very little sources and proof how the history of winemaking continued. After the decline of the Roman Empire, there exist very little sources of what happened to the vineyards and viticulture throughout Europe. What we know definitely, because then written proof exists again, is that the Catholic Church and the monasteries and monks brought viticulture in Europe to an absolute new rise. The Benedictines, but also the Cistercian monks and many others cultivated wines because they needed them for the rituals in church, and viticulture all across the European wine-growing areas came to an absolute new flowering, and the quality is said to have risen tremendously. In the Middle Ages, we find a lot of written sources which prove that the monks invested a lot of time and effort into viticulture, and they really developed quality wine in a very early stage. In some wine growing areas such as Burgundy, they founded the geographical indications that we still find nowadays and that make it possible to distinguish quality levels in a kind of pyramid from the best spots to other areas which are supposed to deliver lower quality wines. All over France, Italy, Spain, Germany, Austria, we find examples of monasteries which invested a lot of effort to gain more knowledge and to become professional in viticulture. One example here is the monastery of Cluny. The most famous story of this monastery Cluny is that the monk Dom Pérignon developed the first sparkling wines in the world and therefore invented champagne. This is not entirely true. He was not the only one person who invented sparkling wine. But what is true, that he and the other monks with whom he worked experimented a lot and put tremendous effort to develop wines which taste well, and they discovered that sparkling wines taste extremely well rather by accident, but later on they tried to make sparkling wine on purpose, and therefore they laid the fundaments of sparkling wines already in the 17th century. After the Romans and later in the Middle Ages, the monks, who had an extreme positive impact on wine growing and wine trade in Europe, there came a devastating event. After the Romans and then later in the Middle Ages, the monks, who had such a positive influence on the European viticulture, a very negative event took place. Unintentionally, a wine louse was imported from the United States into Europe. This wine louse is a small bug and it's called phylloxera. The phylloxera was, as mentioned, unintentionally brought from America to Europe, and there it was eating up the roots of the wines. The European wines, Vitis vinifera, which is the culture quality wine that we all know nowadays, is not resistant against phylloxera. American wild grape varietals are. Of course, in the 19th century, no one knew about this. Within a few years, the phylloxera wine louse ate up the entire viticultural area of Europe. Only very, very few remote areas, mostly in very stony regions, such as the Mosel wine growing area, they were not eaten up by this bug. All the rest of Europe was devastated. There was hardly any vineyard that survived. When we look at the chronological events that came with the phylloxera devastation, we see that it was first located in the Languedoc area 1861, 1862, around that time. It then made its way from the southern French area through the entire European wine world. It was detected in 1865 in Portugal, where in a short period of time it destroyed the entire port wine production. In 1866 it arrived in Bordeaux, where it ate up the entire high-class wine region within just 1 or 2 years. It then also spread over the Rhone Valley into Switzerland. 1872 it destroyed the entire Cognac wine growing area, and also in 1872 it landed in Austria, where one of the oldest research centers and wine education schools were founded, the one of Klosterneuburg, which had at that time only one and most important reason and goal: to find a solution against this wine bug, the phylloxera.